Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our very first Study Hack webinar, where we'll be sharing insightful tips on how you can better cope with exam stress, especially now that the world is flipped upside down due to the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Katlego, and I am a junior brand manager for SACAP. I will be your host this morning. So before we get into the webinar, there's just a few house rules that I would like to bring forth, just to make sure that we are all comfortable. Please be advised that we will have a short Q&A session after the webinar. We will be addressing some of your questions relating to the topic at hand. Also note that the session is recorded and will be shared on all our social media platforms. At a later stage, we'll give you the handles as we proceed. We are aware that there is high internet usage in the country, thus slowing down connection in some parts of the country. We do kindly ask for your patience in that regard. We are also working from home, so you might occasionally hear a microwave beep here and there or a child screaming. We ask that you please also just bear with us in that sense. But to better help us understand how we can better cope with exam stress and also help prepare better in terms of how to get to that final lap of your exams, we have quite an interesting panel that will be taking you through the various elements. We have Lauren Martin and Diana De Souza, who will be speaking into emotional well-being as a tool to boost your performance. We also have Esmarie Cilliers, who will be giving you a few studying strategies that will help you achieve success. We have Nathalie Mat, who will be speaking into healthy eating for healthy results. Lastly, we have Joshua Hahn, who will be speaking into movement as a MATRIC medicine. So this is bound to be a very interesting conversation, and we do hope that you guys do enjoy it. Before we proceed, I'm going to just hand over to Diana De Souza and Lauren Martin to just chat into how emotional well-being can be used to boost your performance.
Thank you so much for that, Katlego. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for a very short practical discussion on equipping students to thrive in the discomfort and uncertainty of the MATRIC exams in 2020. Both Diana and I will be discussing emotional well-being during MATRIC exams. I will start with explaining our approach to emotions, and then Diana will end with some practical tips. If you have any specific questions around emotional well-being and coping, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A box. Let's get started on the next slide. As students preparing for the upcoming examinations, I want you to think about some of the emotions you're currently experiencing. Statistically, the emotions that you can see in front of you in the pictures are some of the most common uncomfortable emotions matrics experience. There's probably a combination of these uncomfortable emotions that you are experiencing at the moment, and there's probably different emotions too. I now want you to think about what you often tell yourself, or what your friends and family often tell you to try and make you feel better when you are experiencing these emotions. Just take some time to think about that. Common phrases are, "It will be fine. Don't worry about it. Just focus on the positive. Do something to distract yourself. Don't think about it." Do those sound familiar to you? What we have done with these thoughts is convince ourselves that our uncomfortable emotions are negative and that we need to get rid of them or control them in order for us to feel better. What we have also done is convince ourselves that only once we feel better will we be able to focus on performing on the exams. Yet somehow, we all still continue to feel these emotions no matter how hard we try to get rid of them. Here's an example to explain this. As attendees, I really want you to try hard now to not think about the following image. Don't think about a pink elephant. Whatever you do, just don't think about a pink elephant. Let's be honest, we all thought about that pink elephant. The pink elephant is like our uncomfortable emotions. The more we tell ourselves to stop thinking about that emotion, the more we can't help but think about that emotion. Research actually shows that trying to control or minimize these uncomfortable feelings actually increases the frequency of how often we feel and think about these very emotions we don't want to feel. The next slide then poses a very important question. So how can we approach the matric exams differently and more effectively? And I want to give you a quick scenario to try practically demonstrate the two emotional approaches we have for the upcoming exams. The quick scenario is shown on the next slide. Okay, so the scenario is there was a project done with clients who were given the instruction to write a paragraph about themselves on a piece of paper in front of them. They had 60 seconds to write the paragraph. But just before they started writing, the instructor placed a mask over their eyes with little holes cut into the mask. It made looking very difficult, let alone writing. If you place your hands over your eyes with little gaps between your fingers, like this, it will probably give you a good feel as to what the participants were struggling with. Many clients complained because they weren't able to see properly. They complained about the unfairness of the situation, the frustration that they had, as well as the added level of anxiety because of this mask. But the instructor said, the mask will remain and they must anyway attempt to work around the mask holes and write the paragraph. After about 30 seconds, no one had written a word yet. The clients were still struggling with trying to see through the mask and readjusting the mask on their faces. So the instructor stopped the exercise and said, okay, let's try approach this task differently. Stop trying to see past the mask. Stop readjusting it. It's okay that there is frustration and anxiety. The situation is what it is. Just attempt to write the paragraph anyway. And in the 60 seconds, every client managed to write despite the mask and the difficulties. So what was the difference here? The takeaway here is the matric examinations is the task at hand. This is what we should be focusing on and preparing for. The mask in the scenario represents the challenges of this year, like COVID, and all the uncomfortable emotions you may be experiencing at the moment. The mask is here potentially trying to distract you from the task at hand. We can approach the examinations with trying to control or get rid of our emotions so that we feel better, and then we can focus on the exams. But this is like us trying not to think about that pink elephant. We would probably spend more time thinking about the challenges and our emotions than on the actual task of the examinations. Or we can approach the exams differently. We can learn that we can successfully do a task and have uncomfortable emotions at the same time. This approach means, first, it is normal, natural, and okay to have uncomfortable emotions. Secondly, there is no need to exert energy, headspace, focus, or techniques in trying to control these natural emotions. Allow them to be there with you. And thirdly, rather refocus your attention, headspace, and techniques on the task at hand, which is your actual exam and preparing for this. I'll now hand over to Diana, who will give you 4 practical tips on how to recenter and focus when we have uncomfortable emotions come up.
Thank you, Lauren. A warm welcome to everyone. So wonderful to have you join us today. So my section today is focusing on emotional well-being and practical tips. So while studying towards your matric exam, your emotions are related to the attitude that you adopt towards studying and your career goals generally. So my first practical tip focuses on how you, once you receive your results, you can actually focus on whether you are eligible for a remark or a recount. And you can contact your school or your district school official and office to find out the appropriate deadline. So the important aspect here to remember is that your matric exams are one road towards your career goals, but there are other roads to consider. So it's important to always remain flexible when planning your career or when you feel stuck or you're wondering what to do next. So my next practical tip is going to be focusing on a more one which focuses on how neural pathways can be improved for your mental health and emotional well-being. So this tip is behavioral. It's a quick and simple exercise that you can do to calm your nerves, regulate your breathing, and improve your general emotional well-being. It only requires a straw and 5 minutes, but the steps can be adapted to just before your exam, or even if you're in the middle of the exam and you want to just calm your mind for a short while. So what you need to do is as follows. You need to sit comfortably with your back straight to allow your lungs to expand fully without restrictions. Have a straw with a small diameter close by for the next step. So you inhale fully through your nose, and then you exhale fully and slowly through the straw. Make sure you exhale fully, but be gentle. Don't force your breath out. Then you inhale through your nose again, then exhale through the straw. Continue this practice for the next 5 or so minutes. You may start to become aware of the natural pause between breaths. So allow your mind to become still. And notice the sensation of being calm and profound stillness that you experience when these pauses between breaths. After you have finished, make some observations. How much has your breathing slowed down? Do you feel a sense of calm coming over you? The reason this activity works is because when you're stressed or panicked, you tend to take slow, shallow breaths. This is because you're activating your sympathetic nervous system, which is triggered when we are stressed or panicked. However, when you do deep, slow breathing, you're actually activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is there to actually calm you down and relax you. So by doing deep, slow breathing or practicing straw breathing, you're actually you're neutralizing the effect of the sympathetic nervous system through doing the deep, slow breathing. And in this way, you actually balance and you'll take your body to a sense of calm and relaxation. So my third tip relates to one that is more cognitive in nature. All it requires is taking 2 minutes of your day to de-stress and to give your mind a mental break. It involves either taking a photo of a happy moment where you felt calm, peaceful, and happy, or a visualization exercise where you imagine a calm, beautiful lake mountain view. So I'm going to take you through the different steps for this particular activity. So take a few seconds again to become as comfortable as possible. Inhale for 4 seconds. Then hold your breath for another 4 seconds. Release your breath for 4 seconds. Repeat 2 to 3 times this exercise. Close your eyes for a moment if you feel comfortable to do so. Now imagine yourself in the following environment. You are hiking in the mountains. You come across a small, beautiful, calm mountain lake. The lake is a beautiful, serene blue color. You stop and you sit on the edge. Birds are flying across a beautiful, cloudless sky. And you watch the birds flying across the sky. As you continue to watch the birds flying, you imagine that you're flying with the birds. Sit down and think about this particular sensation and what you're feeling at the moment. Do you feel a sense of calm and relaxation coming over you? Do you feel at peace and happier? Nothing has changed. How you choose to focus on your attention on the world around you has shifted. So this is an act of self-awareness. And with practice, you can increase the neural pathways that improve your mood and help enhance your mental and your emotional well-being through doing this particular exercise. So my last tip relates to a resource pack There is a number of resources you can use to explore and support the next step in your exploration around your matric exams and your next step, but also valuable mental and emotional well-being tips. Other practical tips you could also consider is looking whether institutions offer supplementary exams in which you could then apply to write this exam and see whether you would pass and then be admitted to an institute of higher education. If you don't qualify for a supplementary exam, you could then consider doing either a diploma or a higher certificate. So there are institutions that offer diploma courses and higher certificates that allow you to improve on your grades. SACAP does offer a diploma in counseling and communication skills and a higher certificate in counseling and communication skills that you could read up on our website and see if that also interests you. So I wish you all the best and in your studies, and I'm now going to be handing over to our next speaker, Esmarie.
Thank you, Diana, for these excellent ideas for relaxation and how to manage your emotions. Okay, guys, let's jump right into how you can study more effectively. Today, I'm going to give you 5 tips that you can start to use immediately. In the first slide, just for some perspective, remember that studying is a process. Be careful not to fall in the trap to think that the exam is a giant mountain in front of you. Remember that studying is this process and you are already halfway there. The material and the content that you are studying is now not new. You have already written tests, exams, you have completed assignments, and you have listened to presentations from your teachers. The process as a whole leads to that success, and you are just now busy with the final stretch. The end is in sight. As we move to the next slide, you are going to ask me, how can I stay motivated for this last stretch? I'm so tired and so bored with all the material, and I'm so tired of studying. Just like we all are unique, the thing that motivates us will be unique and different for each of you. This slide contains a few ideas, but I would like to highlight the 2 that I prefer to use. So the first one is visualization. So in the morning, before you get out of bed, visualize yourself as a plane on a runway, getting ready for takeoff, ready to reach the sky. Then imagine how you get up and ready to tackle the day and your studies. Visualize the day that you get your results and how it will feel when you have achieved those goals and when you are up in the sky and flying. The next technique is to prioritize. Start with the stuff that you are struggling with or that you feel you haven't completely have under your knee. And then work your way down to the material that you know well. This way, you will feel that you are moving and that you are actually accomplishing something. As we move to the next slide, the second tip is to make sure that your study area is set up in a conducive way to work. Ensure that you have everything you need: paper, pens, erasers, everything. Make sure that it's comfortable, that it's not too warm or too cold, and that you have enough fresh air. Every evening before you go to bed, pack away the stuff that you have studied for that day and get things ready for the next day. This will help to signal your brain that you are done and that you need to get some rest. It will also help you in the morning to get up and going. Sometimes a bit of variety is good. So you can do some of your revision, for instance, in a garden. In the next slide, I'm going to show you how to set up a study schedule and to stick to it. Firstly, the study schedule must be realistic and doable. If you are not a morning person, it will not help to schedule time to study at 5 o'clock in the morning because you will not be able to do it. And you will start to feel demotivated and feel that you cannot stick to your plan. Make sure that the schedule includes time for self-care, rest, and for having fun. I'm going to explain the blocking method that is used all over the world to increase effectiveness. This method is also used by Elon Musk, who is famous for his immense productivity. So in the next slide, you can see an image of the popular technique called the Pomodoro method. Now, according to the Pomodoro method, you divide your time into smaller blocks and then allocate specific tasks or topics to each one of those blocks. The idea is to divide your day into 3 sets of Pomodoros. So you'll have a morning set, an afternoon set, and an evening set. Each of these sets will contain 3 or 4 Pomodoro blocks. One Pomodoro block is 20 to 35 minutes long, and then a 5 to 10 minute short break. Now, during these short breaks, you can apply some of the techniques that Hannah has explained in her presentation, and then you can reserve the longer breaks between your sets for eating and exercising and having fun. In order for you to keep this study plan going, it is important to take good care of yourself. My next slide summarizes this self-care. So self-care is the cornerstones of managing stress. Natalie and Joshua will give more tips on eating and exercise, but remember the following: drink enough water, eat healthy, take vitamins, exercise, and make sure that you get sufficient sleep. Remember, your body is the vehicle that you are going to use to write the exams. So we need to be kind to ourselves. Now that we have a plan, we are motivated, we have a place to execute our plan, and our vehicle is ready. How do we do this? Let me show you in my next slide some scientific methods that you can use to study more effectively. Before we go into it, remember that you should not change where you are now, things that are already working for you. The idea is to add some extra techniques in the way that you study, and this will keep it interesting and keep you motivated. So we are also going to use each and every one of these techniques in a different Pomodoro block, and that will give you the feeling of movement and going forward. So in the first place, remember that reviewing and repeating is still the main and most important way to study. Once you are finished with your review, you are going to move into active recalling. So this is where you close your books, you close your notes, and you see how much of the work you can remember. A good idea is also to use some practice tests. This works well for your practical subjects like maths and accounting and EGD. On the next slide, I have some more techniques. So the first one is called contextual learning, and that is where you use connections to help you remember things. So you connect a concept to knowledge that you already have. For instance, if you are studying biology and you already know the anatomy of the fish very well, now you need to study the anatomy of the dog. You can use what you already know from the fish, compare the two, and connect the concepts from the dog to the fish. In this way, you are using knowledge that you already have to remember new knowledge. You can also use this when you are studying languages by including some examples of difficult words. Pretend to be the teacher. Grab your baby sister or your dog and try to lecture to them the stuff or the information that you are studying. This way you can practice retrieving information and remembering things in a fun way. Lastly, close your books, pack away your notes, and draw concept maps from memory. See how much information you can come up with, and this is how you can engage the creative parts of your brain into your studies. So in my next slide, I'm going to look at the stuff that you need to avoid. So firstly, don't overlearn things and then run the risk to not getting through all the work that you need to prepare for the exam. Don't multitask, switch off those phones, and avoid burnout by sticking to your schedule and not staying on a subject longer than you intended to. Lastly, before I hand over to Nathalie, that will tell you how to feed that brain of yours, remember that just a little bit extra can make a big difference. Thank you.
Right, everyone. Thank you, Esmarie. I really loved how you referred to the body as a vehicle to get through exams. And my first slide shows exactly the same kind of idea, that our brain is the most important organ that we're going to use during studying and getting through the exams. And so I'm going to talk to you as a dietitian about how we can fuel our brain and get through the exams really well. And so the average brain weighs only 2 or 3% of our total body weight, about 1.5 kilograms, but it is an incredibly hungry organ, and it uses about 20% of our total energy in the day. And so what we want to do is make sure that we are fueling this organ really, really well, so it just carries us through and performs really well during the exams. And so on the next slide, I want to talk to you about blood sugar levels. Now, our brain is very sensitive to the levels of sugar or carbohydrates that we have inside our body. Our brain uses carbohydrates or starchy foods and sugars as its primary fuel source. And what we want to do is stay in that yellow band that you can see of normal blood sugar levels. So ordinarily in the day, we eat breakfast, we eat lunch, and we eat dinner, and we top up our blood sugar levels throughout the day, so they never go super low and they never go super high. But if we do skip a meal or delay a meal or skip a snack, what we sometimes see is our blood sugar levels dip. And when our blood sugar levels dip, we start getting hungry, we get moody, we get cravings, and we tend to get tired. So when your blood sugar levels get low, your appetite is a signal from your body that, hey, I need food. And what we tend to do if we've gotten over hungry is we tend to overeat. And so our blood sugar levels go from low to high, and we basically go onto this blood sugar roller coaster. When our blood sugar levels go high, we go straight into fat storage mode, and we also experience mood swings. And so when it comes to blood sugar control, I really want you to focus on eating small, regular meals so that you get this brain really, really well fueled. Next slide, please. So the decisions that we make when we are eating during exams will influence how our brain performs. And if we are making less healthy food choices consistently, you run the risk of going onto that blood sugar roller coaster, which might potentially influence your stress levels even more. And so how we eat can influence whether we are performing more like Pinky from this classic cartoon, or a little bit more like Brain in terms of having those beautiful blood sugar levels. So we make the decisions around how well our brain performs with our food choices. So let's move on and have a look at what a good blood sugar, what a good diet is going to look like. So ideally, after a night's sleep, we should pick up our blood sugar levels. I'm looking at you, breakfast skippers. And what we want to do is eat something that's going to pick up our blood sugar levels, but with lots of fiber, because fiber helps to keep us fuller for longer. Then what we want to do later in the day is have a lunch Whether you're having lunch at home or you're having lunch at school, I would love you to use a homemade lunch that includes a good variety of protein-rich foods, so lean meats, chickens, fish, also some starchy foods that are going to keep that brain energized, and some fresh produce. We forget that I want to see a rainbow of fresh fruits and veggies at your meals. And then dinner time, again, I would love you to choose a lean protein. Always include a little bit of starch to keep that brain well energized, and don't forget your fresh produce, your veggies. During the day, your fruits and yogurts make a great snack as well, instead of other snack foods that are less desirable, which leads me on to an important point as we move on, that I want you to rethink your drink. So in your age group, one of the biggest issues that I as a dietitian see are that way too much sugar is being drunk from fruit juices, the sugar in tea, the sugar being added to tea and coffee, as well as energy drinks. And the energy that we get, or the sugar that we drink from these drinks, does not satisfy us in the same way that we get energy from food. And so we tend to get in more energy than we would have had if we had just eaten food. And when I say energy, it's not like, oh, this is a good thing. I mean just kilojoules. And so when it comes to regulating your appetite, your drinks can get in the way of a healthy appetite control, but also can really put you on that blood sugar roller coaster that I don't want you on. So please choose water as your primary drink. Moving on. At this age, the choices you make may not seem that important, but they will affect how you, the choices you make as an adult. And so what kind of shape do you want to be in as an adult? What do you want to look like in later life? We want to make those healthy choices now. We want to start now already. So let's talk about the basics of healthy eating. What does this look like? Well, first and foremost, in my next section, you'll see, I want you to eat a variety of foods. Why? Because when people eat a big mix of foods, they are more likely to get in all of their nutrients than when they're eating just the same 3 or 4 foods day in and day out. And so you want to make sure you're getting a variety. My next slide talks a bit about what Joshua is going to talk about, and that is being physically active. Do you know how many minutes of physical activity you need a day? People below the age of 19 need roughly 60 minutes of physical activity every day. And it doesn't need to be running. It doesn't need to be gymming. It can be playing with your dog, dancing, walking, literally any kind of movement. But you do need to be moving your body every day. And it is a really important means of managing stress. My next slide talks about something I've already mentioned quite a lot, and that is keeping sugar and refined starchy foods in check. And so a lot of people feel that carbs are the devil, or, you know, we want to go easy on white breads and things like that. And I want you to know that I want you to watch your overall sugar intake, but do not avoid carbohydrates altogether. It is not a good time to go experimenting with new diets when you are studying. So when we choose starchy foods, I would like you to choose ones that look closer to its natural form, meaning that it's higher in fiber. And if you can read a label, I would like you to eat starchy foods that contain at least 6 grams of fiber per 100 grams of food. That will help to keep you nice and full and give you that smooth blood sugar control. And another thing to do as well is to look for foods, as I said, that are close to their natural form. So mealies, rice, whole wheat breads, and high fiber cereals are a great choice. On my next slide, I talk about meat, fish, chicken, and eggs, and say that these can be eaten daily. Many South Africans, not all South Africans, but many South Africans eat more protein than they need. And you can actually get plant-based proteins, like a legume curry. There's a recipe coming in your resource pack that you can use instead of always having to eat meat, fish, or chicken. So don't forget, you want to choose lean options, and you don't need to eat them with every single meal to still have a balanced meal. All right. My next slide is one of my favorite topics, and that is eating plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables every day. The average South African eats way too little fresh fruits and veggies. The World Health Organization recommends that we get about 5 pieces of fresh fruit and vegetables a day, or about 400 grams of fresh produce, and very few people who walk through my doors start off eating that much. Very, very good for immune function, which is important at the moment, but also when we eat fresh fruits and vegetables, they have a little bit of fiber, they have lots of water, and they really just help to add some of the immune boosting nutrients that our body does so well with. My next slide is a little bit controversial, and that is, if you choose to drink, do so in moderation. We should only be drinking past the age of 18, and I want you to know that alcohol can affect your brain function. And so from a studying perspective, I would encourage you to steer clear of alcohol. If you are drinking and you are of legal age, know that the definition of moderation is considered not more than 2 standard drinks for a man and 1 standard drink for a woman per day. So please do go easy on the alcohol. Moving on, I've got some exam survival tips for you. The first one is, while you are eating, eat. And while you are studying, study. But don't mix the two, because it is often very hard to say, have I had enough to eat, if I'm not paying attention to the eating. So if you are studying, focus on the studying and use your breaks, as Esmarie said, between your pomodoros or between your pomodoro blocks, rather than nibbling as you go, especially since some people will actually use that snack as a really nice productivity break, just to give their brain a little bit of a break from the studying. I would also encourage you to limit your intake of stimulants. So a little bit of caffeine can improve concentration, but excess caffeine gets in the way of that. And I know this from when I was a student myself. If a little bit of coffee is good, more must be better. No, absolutely not. Especially in the evening when you need to sleep, because that sleep is also so important. And so I would recommend that you do not have in total more than 4 cups of coffee a day, and even that might be too much for some people. So really go light on the stimulants, and I very much include your energy drinks in this, because they just have sugar and a bit of caffeine, no real nutrients in them, and too much caffeine can actually make you feel quite a bit more stressed. I would also encourage small, regular meals. As you saw in that picture with the blood sugar control, when you top up your blood sugars regularly, you keep your brain in that perfectly fueled state where you don't have to produce stress hormones, you don't have your energy levels dipping, you just can carry on, and you can carry on concentrating. And that is what small, regular meals really should help you with. My next tip is to choose homemade foods over takeaway foods. And we are starting to go out of our houses more now that lockdown is easing up, but I would still encourage you to have control over what goes into your food. At restaurants and takeaways, they use a lot more sugar, a lot more salt, a lot more fat than we use at home. And while that might be tasty, it isn't necessarily what you need to help you concentrate well. So limit heavy meals, because they're going to steal the blood from your brain to your digestive system. All right, and my last tip is to be prepared. In the same way that you are currently busy studying so much for your exams, making healthy food available can reduce the pressure on you when it comes to breaking up those study sessions. And so if it helps you, you can pack your food for the day, pack your lunchbox for the day, pack your snacks for the day, so that you know, according to my schedule, at this time I'm going to stop for lunch. My lunch is made. I don't need to chop things or put things together. Like, it's done. You can just go, eat your lunch, relax for that full time that you're relaxing and eating, and then carry on, and you don't waste time. So I will often encourage at a meal time, like maybe at dinner time or at breakfast time, prepare everything for the next day so that you're ready to go and you don't feel like you're wasting time. All right. I hope you enjoyed those tips. Moving on now, I'm going to introduce you to Joshua, who's going to talk about exercise.
Thank you, Nathalie. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. My name is Joshua Hahn, and I'm a biokineticist based in Cape Town. I'm going to be talking to you about movement as MATRIC medicine. So if we break up the word biokinetics, which is what I do, bio means life and kinetics means movement. So a biokineticist is a health professional that prescribes exercise as medicine. We see clients from final phase rehabilitation all the way through to athletes wanting to increase their performance. So let's talk about sitting. Sitting is something we do all day, every day. We do it at home, school, university, the workplace. We're doing it now on the webinar. And we usually do this for around 6 or more hours a day. But did you know sitting has adverse effects on both the body and the brain? So let's look at the body. If we're looking at our fats, cholesterol, blood glucose, waist circumference, and blood circulation, they're all negatively affected from prolonged sitting. Another effect that goes hand in hand with poor circulation is blood pooling, right? This is when the blood collects in the legs. So no muscle pump from the legs means a portion of the blood remains in the legs, causing a lower volume of blood to flow through the body. As we know, blood is extremely important as it carries oxygen, nutrients, and hormones, all necessary to sustain life. All of these aspects affect the heart and the metabolic system, increasing the risk of conditions like heart failure, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and insulin resistance. So if we're looking at the brain, there are 3 main effects, and this is on your concentration, your memory recall, and productivity. They're all affected with prolonged sitting. All of these factors combined create a less than optimum state in the body, which is something we want to avoid, especially going into exam. We can combat this. Moving on, I want you guys to think of exercise a little bit differently, right? I want you guys to think of exercise as movement instead. Okay, we're designed to move. We have joints and we have muscles, all for the purpose of moving. Exercise is essentially movement done at a certain intensity and for a specific period of time, aka routine, right? This means that something as simple as looking from left to right can be considered an exercise. So in the pack that we'll give you guys after this webinar, I've included 3 exercise sections for you. Session 1 is an exercise session done in your seat, right? So let's say you're in a study zone, you don't really want to get up and go anywhere, but you feel you need to get some movement into the shoulders, the neck, the hands, the spine, maybe you're feeling a bit stiff, so that will address that, right? Session 2 is done still in your study environment, but we're going to stand up. Now, this session will address the blood pooling and poor circulation problem we face with sitting. The last session is done completely out of your study environment. It will help with your fitness as well as your mental state. It is important to take time away from your studies too, so that the brain and body can rest, absorb, and adapt. Because when we feel good, we do good. Right? So remember to pay attention to how your body is feeling and make sure you get some movement in so that you can work on your studies in your best possible mental and physical state. Right, so I'm going to be handing over back to Kat so she can bring us to the. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists for those insightful tips. I feel like these are just some of the tips that I wish I had gotten many years ago when I was still in school, but we certainly do hope that these will certainly help you cope and manage better in order to ace your exams and move on to the next phase of your life. We are still taking questions. If there are any questions that you would like us to address in the webinar, we do have a question that came through from Anonymous, and they're asking, what tips do you have for time management as well as procrastination?
Okay, thank you, Katlego. I would like to answer the question on time management. I think procrastination goes hand in hand with that because it is something that we tend to do. We are bored and tired of the work and we don't want to do it, or we feel that it's very difficult and we don't want to get into it. So first with time management, at the end of your day, you know how your day, you know what you need to do the next day. So for instance, if you're writing a paper from say 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock, you know already that you can block that time out as paper time. You need to make sure that you have enough time to eat breakfast and to get to the place where you are writing. After writing a paper, I would say block a bit of time off for exercise or relaxation, and then indicate what time are you going to start studying. Before you start, you'll have some lunch, and say, for instance, you're going to start at 2 o'clock. So from 2 till the time that you go to bed, you have time to block them as Pomodoro blocks. So you will say the first Pomodoro block is going to be from 2 o'clock until 2:30. And during that block, I am going to study this specific piece of material. So you write it down and you write down what you're going to study. Then you have your 5-minute break. And in your next block, you identify the next piece of work that you're going to study. It could be new work or new material, or you could say, in my first block, I'm just going to read through the material and see how much I can remember. And then in my second block, I'm going to use active recalling, or I'm going to try and teach the dog how to do maths. And so for the rest of your day, you will block them into specific time slots and allocate specific tasks to those time slots. As far as procrastination goes, I think Lauren and Diana could also add to this question, but visualization is an extremely powerful method to get yourself going and to see how you actively get up, sit in front of your desk and start working. And also being organized. If everything is organized, okay, now I can't put the task out any longer. I have to go and sit. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much, Esmarie. There's still on movement, Josh, because you just spoken to us about movement and how we can better use that to help us focus a little bit better. There's a question that came through and says, asking, will you stand and study? Very interesting.
That is a good question. I would say definitely. You can stand and study, you can walk and study. I would say as long as whatever you're doing doesn't take away from the attention of studying, so it doesn't overpower or take away from what you're actually trying to do, you can definitely do it. Studies have shown that walking actually helps with creativity. So it may actually be a good thing to walk and study. Obviously, it depends on what you're studying and how much you have to study. So I would say yes, you can definitely stand and study.
Thank you so much. Esmarie, I think you touched on this a little bit, but there's a question asking, how do I make a study schedule?
Okay, first I would take a piece of paper, A4 paper, and draw my days in that piece of paper. So I'm just going to draw here quickly. I hope you guys can see it. So there's 5 blocks, and I will say, okay, today I'm going to study in the first block, or the first day, I'm going to study maths. In the second day, I'm going to study English, for instance. And then the third day, I'm going to study history. And then you take the material that you plan to study in that day, and you divide it into Pomodoro blocks. I think there's 2 stages to a schedule. So the first stage is before you actually start to write your exams. So this is usually that time that you get off. When I was in high school, we used to talk about our 40 days. 40 days to the end, to the start of the exams, or time off that you got before you started that exam. So you will schedule revision into that stage. The next stage of your study schedule actually needs to line up with what you are writing. So if you're writing on a Tuesday maths, you will study on the Monday for that test. And you will still use the Pomodoro block to organize your day around what you need to cover for the test. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you so much. Just to urge everyone, if you still have any more questions, continue to pop them in the Q&A box. If you would like at any given point for us to contact you, our team to contact you, please leave us your contact details in the chat box. Just another question again, any specific tips on how to improve on math? This is, I think, a tricky one because in more cases, we are often advised to keep practicing math. I'm not too sure in terms of either Diana or Lauren that would be able to maybe feed into this in terms of how do you get to a point where you basically improve on a certain subject in school? Is it doing more of it? Is it maybe trying to figure out what methods are used? How would you suggest we help somebody improve their math in a sense?
Thanks, Katlego. I think these are very interesting questions. And I guess maybe just to touch on the math question as well as this question around how do you improve your marks overall? There isn't a straightforward answer here, and I know that can be quite frustrating, but we're all unique, and we all have very different circumstances, different resources, different support, different techniques that work for us. So what I would offer is that we will respond individually to these questions and make contact with these attendees within the week. Just so that we can understand the individual a bit better and the context a bit better.
Thank you so much for that, Lauren. Last question that's in the chat box now is asking, with regards to sleep, is it better to have a long 8-hour sleep session or have naps of 1 hour, 1 hour duration between your study sessions?
I know it seems strange, the dietitian wants to answer this, but I would really like to talk to it. When we don't sleep enough, our stress hormone production goes up, our cortisol goes up, and our body perceives it as really stressful. So just from a regulation and having a regular pattern, I would definitely encourage you, Caleb, to rather consider having a good night's sleep, letting your body rest and recover. When you sleep, you also, I'm sure the psychologists will agree, help process what you have taken in. And it'll just be much more restorative, and it'll be much more like your normal pattern than having these little study breaks. Your sleep cycles are normally about 45 minutes long. So even 1 hour isn't an ideal length of time to nap. If you didn't manage to sleep enough in the night, please do have a teeny tiny little nap, but a short one, but rather have a long set of restorative sleep. Is so much better from a blood sugar perspective, from an appetite perspective, and just from your normal pattern perspective, so that your body doesn't perceive what you're going through as a super stressful time. Does anyone want to add to that?
I would like to add to that just a little bit. I want to firstly affirm what Nathalie has said. Yes, 8 to 10 hours is what research suggests that we should get. And again, there's individual differences around that. Some people need less sleep and some need more. But I also want to add that if you do take a short nap, one sleep cycle, a normal sleep cycle, where you go from your light sleep into your REM sleep, takes about 45 minutes. It's also, there's individual differences, but it is about 45 minutes. So they say that if you do need that extra nap, that it should not be longer than 45 minutes, because that's one sleep cycle. The moment you go into a longer sleep cycle, you are swapping your night and day. It is important to sleep at night because it is more conducive for deep sleep and deep relaxation.
Thank you so much for that. There doesn't seem to be any more questions. Let me just double check. There's one here for Joshua. It's asking, what is a power nap and what is a coffee nap?
Okay, so I know what you're referring to. So a coffee nap or a power nap. So what happens is, because coffee takes about 30 minutes to be absorbed into the gut and take effect, there is a method of napping where you actually have coffee before you nap, and the nap is about 20 to 25 minutes. So by the time you wake up from the nap, you feel rested and you feel alert. So that's what a coffee nap is. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you so much for that insight, Joshua. I think I've also just learned something new. I didn't know what a coffee nap was, but thank you for that. There's another question from Anonymous asking, how can a visual learner maximize how they study?
Thanks for that. What an interesting question. And I guess we have all been taught that we've got particular ways that we approach studying. So this attendee is obviously a visual learner in terms of they needing to see pictures or mind maps in order to really get the work in. And I think it's important that matric students do study in a particular way that they're comfortable with and tried and tested methods. And so if you are a visual learner, I would encourage you to continue to learn in that particular way. But I also want to just add 2 points here. One being that we stimulate different parts of the brain if we learn to incorporate other techniques outside of just visual learning. So if we include movements, or if we include audio-visual kind of learning. And so I would encourage someone that is tried and tested methods of a visual learner to incorporate some other techniques so that you can stimulate your brain to also think about and learn in different ways. And the second thing I want to add here is this year has been a very different year to any of the other years that we've experienced. And so while we have had tried and tested methods and they have worked, when we are very rigid in how we approach anything, we run the chance of actually increasing our anxiety here. Because if we think we can only study in a particular way, and then it isn't going according to plan, we have all these anxiety and kind of all the emotions that we spoke about that can hinder effective studying. And so I just almost want to say to attendees to give yourself some grace. It is okay if things don't go according to plan, and your ability to approach your exams flexibly will probably stand you in good stead here. And so as a visual learner, approach it the way that you know how, but almost have the courage to include additional techniques outside of this visual learning to improve the way you study. Thanks, Katlego.
Thank you so much, Lauren. We have come to the end of the webinar. I'd like to thank each and every one of our attendees for taking the time out to be with us today, just so that they can actually take home a few tips and tricks to take forth to their exams. If there are any other comments or questions that you would like to send through, please send them through to the Q&A box and we will respond to that offline. We would like to invite you all to our open days happening in November. If you are interested in studying at any of our physical campuses, we are still closed for now due to COVID, but we do have a virtual open day taking place on the 14th of November. But if you still enjoyed studying online throughout this time and would like to continue your studies online, please note that we do have a well-established online campus that's been running for 6 years, and we would like to invite you to our online campus open days as well, happening on the 18th of November and the 25th of November. Please feel free to RSVP on our website. All the information will be published on all our social media platforms if you happened to miss this one. But we look forward to hosting you guys at our open days and hope that you enjoyed the session and wish you all the best for your exams and making sure that going forward, your futures are sort of in great hands in terms of the tools that we've given you to make sure that you move forward with that. Thank you so much. These are just our handles to our social media platforms that if you would like to follow us and get any more information, please feel free to like our pages. There is very insightful information and blogs that we put out that you can actually make use of. Thank you so much and have a great day further.